Hello, and welcome back to another episode of The Inner Republic. In today's episode, I'm talking to high achievers, entrepreneurs, parents, go getters out there who feel like they have done everything for their health and even their happiness. And maybe they've made pretty good strides, but they feel like they've either plateaued or even worse, they're coming down the back end. Maybe you're getting into your 40s and a doctor told you need to go on testosterone replacement therapy. Maybe you've experienced an autoimmune disease, or maybe you're just feeling a little bit more lethargic and tired, even though you're doing all the right things, the best diet, you're doing the working out, but something still feels off. I want to explain to you what's actually going on the inside in your body and in your mind. And I want to talk to you about it from my own experience and going through my functional diagnostic certification program from this last year. But before we get into the episode, if you're not already subscribed and following me, click that subscribe button on YouTube. If you're listening to this on a podcast, make sure you are following me. Go follow on Instagram if you're not, Shun_Randy, where I'm talking about all of this stuff. I'm speaking to high achievers, speaking to entrepreneurs, and I'm helping you get healthier and happier. You can do both at the same time. Okay, let's get into the episode. So, I'm taking you back about a year. So last year, around this same time, which, if you're listening to this when it's released, this is April of 2026. But if you're listening to it later on, just know that in this time in 2025, I was going through a functional diagnostic nutrition certification program. What is that? Functional diagnostic nutrition is a education and certification program for practitioners who want to be able to have access to and give and interpret functional labs to their clients. This is essentially the closest way you can get to doing doctoral things without actually going back to school and being a doctor. So I now, as a functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner, have access to the thousands and thousands of labs out there, including blood work, but other things like GI maps and so on and so forth, hormone panels, the whole nine yards. The difference is, though, is as a functional practitioner, we will then interpret those labs in a holistic, functional way for kind of like longevity and preventative healthcare, whereas doctors either wouldn't run some of these tests or they're going to look at it again from a clinical perspective. If there's nothing out of range or a disease can't be diagnosed, they're not talking about it. So that's how it's different. Okay. Now, why did I decide to do this? I mean, there's kind of three main reasons. I've been a coach for 13 years and I'm always seeking to broaden my horizons. And most of my education, both in the collegiate sphere with kinesiology and then the 13 years of experience, has been in the fitness space or the performance space. And I kind of wanted to branch out, especially with everything going the way it is these days with holistic health and wellness and getting so many questions or so many people ask me things about these podcasts like Peter T and all that. I wanted to have a really good foundation. And so just wanted to expand my horizons there. And then secondary is I actually have grown up around kind of like autoimmune diseases and chronic health issues. My dad, for most of his life, all of my life, most of his adult life, has experienced something called Reiter's syndrome, also known as reactive arthritis. This is an autoimmune disease. And I vividly remember being like a preteen teenager and my dad yelling out in the middle of the nights to help. He needed help getting up like off of the couch or from when he was sleeping. And that's just something that stays with you. As a preteen and a teen boy, your dad, this person who you put on a pedestal, you see him pretty much crippled and you're having to be the one who helps him. It's just something that sticks with your subconscious. And then for those that follow me know, I talk about my sister passed away from leukemia when I was 19. I have another sister who experienced breast cancer. I have another sister who is experiencing autoimmune issues. So I've just kind of grown up around chronic health issues. And I think subconsciously, I've always wanted to be a healer and somebody that helps people with that. So boom, that's another thing. But then third is that being a coach in a CrossFit gym for 13 years, every single day of my life, I'd seen this interesting phenomenon go on over the years that I couldn't really put words to, and I didn't have a deeper physiological understanding for what was going on, that I'd have these members who were incredibly fit. I'm talking six pack, I'm talking low body fat percentage, they can do the muscle ups, they can do the Fran. They have graying hair, they have bags under their eyes. They're coming to me and saying, Sean, my doctor told me I had low testosterone or whatever it is. And the obvious answer here is, well, it's overtraining. But for all intents and purposes, these people really weren't overtrained. And so I was having a hard time because everything I was being told is the fitter you get, the healthier you get. But they weren't seeming healthy. It almost seemed like they were speeding up aging. They weren't necessarily happier either. So like I was just confused about what was going on, more so than just the overtraining, under recovering, under eating thing. Like there were certain people where I'm like, that's not what's going on here. They're coming in doing an hour class. I'm so confused. What is happening here? And so like all three of those things led me to like, I want to dive in. Now, this education course is incredibly in depth, as it should be. You're dealing with people's health. You're dealing with looking at labs. It needs to be in depth. So we're talking a year, can be a year plus for people to go through the education. The testing out is incredible. It is multiple tests, essentially, like doing the work. You have a mentor. You have to have all of these different kind of avatars. Like this person has this. Like how are you reading their data? You have to do a written final, which is like 200 plus questions, and oral final, all things that it should be. Again, you're dealing with people's health. This needs to be rigorous, and it was rigorous. Part of the education, though, is you get partnered with a mentor, and during that time, you are going to be your first client, essentially. So we have the labs done on us, right? The new soon-to-be practitioners. We get our data back, and then we're going to sit with a mentor and kind of see how a mentor goes through this, how they interpret the data, and all that kind of stuff. And so I'm really excited for this. I'm like, okay, I'm going to do this. And I'm thinking like, this is going to come back fantastic. Like, I don't know, like there's probably not going to be a lot wrong with me. I've always had some gut issues. So I knew like my GI map would probably come back a little wonked out. I've been gluten intolerant for a long time. So I maybe had a feeling like, okay, that would probably come back wild. But like, again, my hormone panel thought would be great, right? Like, dude, look at me, 6-pack, 50% body fat, kill it in the gym. Of course, like my hormones are going to be great. My cellular health is going to be great. Like low heart rate, 48 beats, VO2 max high, like all the things, dude. It's going to be great. That's not what happened. Get my test results back, schedule my meeting with my mentor. And so here I am, I'm sitting with my mentor, and she looks at me and she goes, Sean, you are on a fast track to something, autoimmune disease, burnout, you name it. Okay. And I go, what do you mean? Like, I'm like, how is this possible? I'm so confused here. I'm incredibly fit. Fit means healthy, right? And she pretty much says like, Sean, you've actually, you've chased fitness. And then she also said achievement, right? Because I told her my story, this is a thing with FD, you have a massive intake form. So she knows my whole kind of life story at this point. She pretty much said like, you have sacrificed your health on the altar of fitness and achievement. And when she said that, I wanted to like, I was like, well, I couldn't because the data says so, because you can't fight. This is the nice thing about having data. You can't fight data, science. But I also knew in the back of my head, she was right. And I had to sit with that because again, here I am thinking like my markers are going to come back fantastic. And she had to explain this to me. And now this is what, not only with me, but the people I work with, this is the thing that I see with high achievers, entrepreneurs. Again, it's a specific subset of people, which is important. Okay. Because I had spent most of my 20s and even into my 30s now, because I'm 33 now. So this was last year when I was 32, chasing achievement, chasing fitness. And we're going to talk about this, how this actually happens. I was putting my body in a chronic low-grade fight or flight state, both because I was running on unprocessed trauma and then layering on top of that more stress, more sympathetic, chronic sympathetic nervous system activation. Okay. And so what she explained to me is, you're not feeling any symptoms. Because I told her, I'm like, dude, I feel fine. Right. And she's like, well, you're not experiencing any like symptoms that you can really feel right now because you're in your 30s. And this is the thing that happens, right? You may be watching this and you may relate to this if you're in your 40s or your 50s. She goes, everything is fine until something snaps. And she goes, you're the poster boy for this. You are the guy that outwardly is incredibly successful, right? You're fit. And then all of a sudden you get into your 40s and she said something happens. An autoimmune disease diagnosis, or it could be something as simple as, sexual inefficiency, right? Like you need to go get on testosterone. You can't, get an erection anymore, something like that, that we in society just chalk up to aging, or it's just normal, just take testosterone or get on, hormone replacement therapy if you're a girl, like, right. All these things. And she goes, you're doing a good thing now because you still have runway before like these crazy symptoms start to show up in your 40s, but you would be the poster boy. You'd be like this is the person who, the trade-off that they don't realize they're making for achievement, for fitness, is their health, and then something snaps. something breaks. And then what happens? Most people go on peptides, hormones, they do all the things except actually address it. Okay. And I want to explain to you what I learned through FDN and what was actually going on under the hood with me. Okay. So this is the origin story of why. And I want to explain, like, if you feel like that's you're the person, again, who's incredibly fit, you've done all the things, but you feel like you always have bags under your eyes, you wake up every morning tired, you're crashing in the middle of the day, you have gut issues, whatever it is, I'm speaking to you and I want to explain what's actually going on. Okay. The thing that I had to understand is that everything, when it comes to our health, is more or less downstream of our stress hormones, cortisol and DHEA. It's a yin and a yang. Cortisol, again, it gets thrown around all the time, but like, what actually is cortisol? Cortisol is a hormone. It's a signal. All hormones are more or less signaling molecules. Okay. Cortisol is released when you're in a fight or flight state. So when your nervous system is in a sympathetic state, and it's cueing to the rest of the body, hey, turn off, most things that have to do with cellular regrowth, with building things up, because we need to prioritize all of our energy, all of our resources to the stressor, right? Fighting the bear, whatever it is. This is not a time for building muscle. Okay. And then DHEA is the opposite. It's the yin to the yang. It's the anabolic. It's the parent anabolic hormone that says, let's grow, cellular regeneration, muscular tissue regeneration, clearing out dead cellular DNA, like all of those things. Okay. So just, again, that's at a very base level. I'm not going deep on physiology here. But when you are in a chronic sympathetic state, sympathetic nervous system state, well, you are chronically releasing cortisol. And I know people roll their eyes when somebody talks about how our modern age is so much about chronic stress. I'm sorry, but that's the case. And now right off the bat, I do want to, one of the arguments here is that, like, okay, yeah, but what about our ancestors? Okay. They were able to handle stress, like their lives was more stressful, etc. Understand that physiologically, our bodies, our nervous system was built to swing from one extreme to the other. Extreme sympathetic, which is fight or flight. Literally, if I don't do this, I will die. So literally, like, I have to flee or I will die. I have to fight or I will die. That's what it was set up for. And then it was also set up for deep parasympathetic, lounging, relaxation for big parts of the day. Our ancestors, like, and when people say ancestors, they're usually thinking like hunter-gatherers. That's what they did. They had big swings, right? They would have to flee or fight or hunt, and those were high sympathetic states, like life or death. But the thing that doesn't get talked about a lot in the modern age, because it's not sexy, it's not hustle culture, it's not something that sells, is that the hunter-gatherers spent a lot of time in true parasympathetic. Like, if they were not hunting or fleeing, they were lounging multiple days in a row. They were not, they maybe would migrate, they would hunt, but then they would stay in an area and be communal for days and days and days. They weren't always on the go or always fighting, right? It wasn't chronic. And this is really important to understand because we live in a completely different environment where it's not wild swings, okay? What we live in is a world where most of us, especially for high achievers, entrepreneurs, we live right over the line of this sympathetic nervous system state. And it's almost like not noticeable. But if we just go through our normal day, we wake up, we immediately get on our phones and we start scrolling. And that puts us into a sympathetic state, especially if it's like news or something bad. But the screen, all of it, we're at home, we're dealing with our kids. We're already thinking about what we have to do at work. We're already kind of like lit up. But it's, again, we're not fighting a bear. Okay. But we're just over the edge. All right. We go to work. We hate our jobs. We hate our boss. We're not making enough money to survive in this crazy world. Like, all of these little things that they just add up. And the thing is our brains, because we have to survive, do a really good job at like rationalizing, reframing, doing whatever to just keep us going, like almost in a comatose state. And we get to this point where we don't even realize we're in a stressful state or we never did to begin with. That's why a lot of people are able to like mentally be like, I'm not stressed, I'm fine. Well, and we're going to get into this, your markers in your nervous system actually says that's a lie. But that's, we'll get into that. And we live in a society where if we choose to do some parasympathetic things, like take a nap in the middle of the day or, go on a retreat or do these things, again, and this maybe is just for the high achievers, entrepreneurs out there, there's a sense of guilt and shame that comes with that, because a lot of us feel like if we are not producing, we don't have value. Now, you can make the argument that's that individual's fault for believing in that lie. Heard, but let's not act like that's not something that is really pushed on us in society. Like the hustle culture thing is, if you're not producing, you're a waste of space. Okay. Talk about keeping you in that chronic fight or flight state. Okay. So you live for years and years and years and years in a chronic fight or flight state. What's actually going on? Well, like I said, when you're in fight or flight, what gets released? Cortisol. When you're chronically in fight or flight, you're chronically releasing cortisol. So I want to talk about what happened on my panel. Okay. So my stress hormone panel. My stress hormone panel actually showed that I'm not producing cortisol really at all. You might be like, well, wait a minute. How does that work? You want cortisol to be released at a healthy level throughout the day, right? It's set up to be part of your diurnal pattern, okay? Your sleep-wake pattern, okay? So like when you first wake up, your cortisol should be the highest because it's the thing that kind of wakes you up. And then throughout the day, you should have a very steady kind of fall off. It should never be like the steep fall off. One of the reasons people have crashes in the middle afternoon is because there's this steep fall off. Okay, we're not getting into the deep stuff here with FDN, but when you are chronically stressed, your body is doing everything it can. It's releasing all this DHEA. It's resilient. Your body's resilient. Everybody has this kind of different breaking point with this, and it's kind of genetic. It's also kind of like, if you have any trauma in your past, whatever it is. But in a healthy stress hormone panel, or in a stress hormone response, you'd have a stressor. Cortisol would go up. Once the stressor is gone, it would go back down. But what we see is stressor has gone up mildly and just stays here for years. Years. And what mine had is I actually came down the other end. It was so long that my body eventually gave me the middle finger. It's like, dog, we can't do this anymore. Not happening. Okay. What I've also seen on panels of people I've worked with is either that or it's still elevated. Actually, if you catch it while it's still elevated, this is better. What happens when you come down the other side of this slope, that's when usually bad things are happening. That's the autoimmune diseases, that's the cancers, and I'm going to explain why that happens, okay? But just the mechanism here of what was on my panel, what I see on panels of high achievers, entrepreneurs, people who are in this place that are fit, outwardly successful, but feel like their health has gone backwards or it's stagnated, their happiness, etc. Okay, so that's what's going on the data. What's going on qualitatively? This is the cool thing about being a functional practitioner about what I do. It's not just about the data. It's about like, how is this actually showing up in your everyday life? Because you can have great markers or try to improve markers, but if you're not qualitatively feeling that or experiencing that, like what good is it doing? This is the big thing about building sovereignty. You want to be able to start listening to the whispers of the body and understanding what your body is telling you before things go off the rails, or, after they do, but then you start to tune in. Okay, so qualitatively what this looks like, if you experience any of these, you may be in this place without knowing it because maybe you haven't had this tested. For me, I'll talk about, this looked like hypervigilance. So for me, like these are things that were going on over the years that I didn't realize were cues that I was in this chronic sympathetic fight or flight state. So one was hypervigilance. Hypervigilance looks like always playing out, like you could say either worst case scenarios, or and I mean, sometimes I still do, play out like arguments that probably will never happen. But I'm like, okay, well, but I got to be ready. I have to be ready for it. Okay, so hypervigilance. Also, like if I was ever going to a movie theater or a crowded space, immediately would think of like, okay, if there's an active shooting situation, where are my exits? Where are all these kind of things? This is very common with people who, come back from war and everything like that. And there may be some men who are like, yeah, that's our duty as a guy. Living in that head 24/7 is not healthy because, again, you're always in this chronic fight or flight state of scanning your environment. And your brain, literally, your brain and your nervous system do not know the difference between like actual reality and what you're fantasizing about. This is why some people can work themselves into a panic attack just like sitting here where I am, because the brain doesn't know any different. You get sympathetic nervous system and then amygdala. So like it matters. Okay. You don't want to live in that brain where you're hypervigilant all of the time. A little bit of vigilance is fine. A big thing in my 20s, which you could argue definitely was overtraining, but why I was overtraining because I was running from the trauma of my sister dying, which was layered into my nervous system. And then I was trying to run from it. So this is why I was overtraining. Now, the symptom you could argue was overtraining, but I was training to be as fit as I could be, highest level CrossFitter in the area, whatever, whole thing. I'm 23 to 25. I don't know the exact age, but I couldn't get an erection. I'm 23 to 25 years old. I have a six pack. I'm deadlifting 500 pounds. Like I'm hot shit, right? I'm the dude. Can't get an erection. That's not great. This one kind of has to link to trauma, but again, one of the things I'll talk about too is this my stress hormone panel codes for PTSD. But this is a pure PTSD symptom is that I would break down and cry at random things. Not like, everybody cries at like maybe like The Notebook or something emotional. Maybe not you, but okay, whatever. A random song, a random shower, a random scene in a movie, and I would immediately be brought back to and I don't know how to explain this other than like the feeling of being in the room when my sister died. Like the heat, I don't know how to explain it. But it wasn't just the crying. It was like the feeling tone of the crying was immediately back to my sister dying. Okay. And then I had a panic attack in 2020. So like that one's obviously, and I talk about how the panic attack was when I decided like I need to address the trauma of my sister dying. And then started working on myself again, mentally, but that wasn't layered in my nervous system. How did that actually show up on the hormone panel? So again, my cortisol was completely flatlined, but my DHEA was really, really high, which is actually not normal. They've actually done studies on this. This hormone panel where collapsed cortisol and like way out of range, high DHEA codes for PTSD. It codes for a body that is still a nervous system that is still stuck in the trauma state and is trying to. The nervous system and the hormones are still trying to overcome the trauma. That's why the DHEA is still really, really high. What we would normally see in just a normally like stressed out person, without maybe some PTSD is either really high cortisol, really low DHEA, or really low cortisol and really low DHEA. That inversion pattern is a little coded for like actual trauma getting into the nervous system and into the hormone pattern. And that's what I had. But nonetheless, right, these were some of my symptoms. Other symptoms, though, is like chronic gut issues, graying hair, bags under eyes, lethargy in the middle of the day, always waking up feeling tired. And this is not for the people who are overweight. This is not for the people who like aren't already working out. Obviously, this is the big thing too, because like in the health space, people are like, just, eat less calories than you burn, just work out and everything will be fine. Honestly, yes. Like for like 90% of the population, 99% of the population, I'm not talking to those people. I'm talking to you, the person who's already doing all the things and you're like, what the hell is going on with me? That's who I'm talking to. Okay. This is probably what's going on. So how does this affect the rest of the body? Why are you having gut issues? Why is all this? When cortisol stays elevated for that long or even collapses, again, it's telling the other systems of the body to essentially shut off. The first place that shuts off is the immune system. But I also want to think about this. Like if cortisol stays elevated that long and it's telling, let's say like the gut, right? Don't repair the, gut lining or the gut barrier, the gut barrier essentially, right? It's leaky gut, okay? Zonulin, there's all these things. Again, we're not getting deep physiology. But like, let's just imagine you have chronically elevated stress for like, let's just say 5 years and everything's fine. And then one day you're like, man, my gut's giving me problems. And then like from then on out, you're the person with gut issues. What actually happened there? Your breaking point with your gut was like around that 5-year mark, 10-year mark, whatever, but it's downstream of cortisol being released. That tight junction opened up, chronic zonulin being released, and now critters have gotten in. Again, we're not going to get deep in this viral stuff, bacterial things. And now you have leaky gut, you have gut dysbiosis. Well, guess what? That loops back to stress, because we only think about stress as like the external things affecting us. We don't think about like mental stress, but there's also internal stress. When you have high inflammation, when you have a messed up gut, there's that internal system that will then record that as stress. And now you're in this feedback loop. This is why you can have somebody who's incredibly fit and is eating well and whatever, and they all of a sudden can't lose weight. They're gaining weight. This is me right now, actually, because and this is a deeper story, but I went back to some bad habits and overtraining and stuff like that because my identity. But nonetheless, downstream sex hormones. Okay. Your sex hormones are downstream of your stress hormones, cortisol and DHEA. So when those are messed up, your testosterone is messed up. Your estrogen is messed up. Your progesterone is messed up. This is why, as a guy I'll speak to, because this happens in my gym all the time, these guys in these 40s, they're like, should I get on TRT? My testosterone is low. And it's always like, that's slapping a Band-Aid on. Your testosterone is low because of something upstream. For most of them, they're entrepreneurs. It's the stress in their life, right? And it's a lot easier in society to slap a Band-Aid on than actually like do the hard work of whatever. But that problem is I've seen guys go on testosterone, and what ends up happening? In 3 years, they have to up it. In 4 years, another symptom shows up. In 10 years, they have an autoimmune disease. Well, you kept masking the symptom. The symptom was trying to tell you something like, hey, brother, slow down. Help me. Your body knows how to fix itself in many ways if you just switch that nervous system over to the parasympathetic state for a while, okay? And you find balance, okay? So if you're a high achiever, if you're an entrepreneur, if you're this person where you're like, dude, I've done everything. I've listened to all the gurus. I'm doing all the diets. I'm doing all the working out. And dude, it was working for a while. But now I feel plateaued, or I feel like I'm going backwards. I feel like I'm not happy. Like I'm anxiety ridden. I'm spiraling all the time. I'm angrier than I used to be. Like one of the key things they tell us in FDN to know if somebody's kind of gone over that, what we call resilience curve on cortisol, like now they're on the back end, is they have these little sentences. They say things like, I just can't handle stress like I used to. I get angry at things that I didn't used to get angry at. When I have a tough conversation, I get way more defensive than I used to, or I snap more easily. Right? These are, and if you're like, damn, that's kind of me, you're probably on the back end of this. Your cortisol is now actually coming back down because you're no longer resilient. Okay. You're losing resiliency. And this is, again, a sign that something's going on. And so if you're this person where you're doing all of the diet stuff, you're doing all of the working out stuff, and yet you find yourself here, this is most likely what's going on under the hood. Okay. And so the question becomes, what are you going to do about it? All right. The hardest thing in your life, high achiever, entrepreneur, person who gets all of their value from external validation and things you produce, the hardest thing in your life is not doing more. It's slowing down. It's doing less. It's sitting with yourself. It's sitting with those thoughts that you're numbing yourself and running from with all of this external achievement stuff, acting like it's altruistic or you're doing it for other reasons than just you can't sit with yourself. What actually matters to you? Your health, your happiness, and your longevity, or not sitting with yourself, not slowing down, not asking for help from somebody who's been through this, right? Because so many people like to say the reason that they work out, the reason they do these things is for health. And yet, when you know these things that I know and that other people know, you go, you're not doing this for health. Why are you chasing another 20-pound back squat PR when you can already squat 400 pounds? I'm talking about me. Let's be clear here. It's not for health, dude. My squat's more than healthy enough. I'm doing that because I want to prove something about, and it's not healthy anymore. To go from a 405 squat to a 425 squat doesn't mean better health markers. It means more inflammation, more muscular tissue breakdown, more stress. I've crossed way over the threshold of like a healthy back squat at this point. But, again, just talking about me here. So listen, if you, like I said, are an entrepreneur, high achiever, and again, I'm talking about a certain subset. This is specific to these people. And again, I'm talking from my own experience, okay? I've had some people like, am I like, leave these people alone? I'm not, one, I'm trying to help. Two, I'm talking from my own experience. I'm not preaching. I'm just sharing what happened to me and what has worked for me and what I realized and found out about myself. Okay. So I'm not trying to make anybody feel bad. Okay. But if you're that subset of person, if you're that avatar where you're like, I'm a high achiever, I'm an entrepreneur, I'm spinning 15 plates and I'm doing all the things, I'm listening to all the authority figures, I've tried all the diets, I've tried all the supplements, and man, I've made good strides, but I am definitely not where I want to be. I still have my autoimmune disease, or I still feel tired all the time, or doctor told me my hormones are messed up. This is probably what's going on for you. I'm just being like, again, I can't say that for certain, but based off of my own experience and then the clients that I've worked with who are these avatars, which there's a lot in CrossFit gyms, this is what's going on. Okay. It is It is a life lived in this chronic low-grade stress that has caused a system-wide shutdown, right, to go on. And everything might be fine for you right now until it's not. And then you're going to blame your age. You're going to blame whatever it is that isn't your lifestyle because it looks like a healthy lifestyle, right? That's the hard part. You're doing all the right things, and yet you're not feeling like you should. If you have a six-pack and all this, you should be feeling abundant. You should be having constant energy throughout the day, and yet you wake up zonked out, you're irritable, and you can't get an erection. Not the best, okay? So I hope that helps explain maybe a little bit of the mechanisms of why you may be experiencing this if you're a high achiever type. And in the next episode, we're going to talk about what you can do about it, all right? This is obviously what I do with my coaching. This is what I help people with, both quantitatively, improve their markers, and then qualitatively, how do we bridge that gap between like improving your markers and then actually feeling like you're living a healthy, abundant life. And in a year, right, you're like, I'm living a completely different life. That's what I do with people. But I'm going to talk about kind of best practices, principles in the next episode if you feel like you've been seen and heard in this episode. So listen, if you like this episode, if you know somebody who this is, this high achiever, maybe it's your spouse, whoever needs to hear it, send it to them. If you feel like I'm speaking to you, hey, I let me know. I'd love to hear it in the comments, whatever it is. Follow me on Instagram, send me a DM if you feel seen, heard. Again, I'm just talking about my own experience. I'm talking about my expertise as a functional practitioner and working in a CrossFit gym for 13 years. So anyways, love you guys. I appreciate you listening, watching, whatever it is, and I'll see you in the next episode.